Drop it. Welcome everyone, not only to the first hour of the Young Turks, but the Power Panel. It's official now. We've got that really aged animation. I'm Johnny Rolla, very excited to be leading you through this first hour, but even more excited for our guests in the first hour, starting with Xander Schultz, social impact entrepreneur and host of What We Don't Know podcast. Xander, welcome to the show. We spoke a while back on my show on the Damage Report. Excited to have you on the Young Turks.
Yeah, thanks for having me over here, John. Appreciate it.
And we're joined once again by David Dayen, executive editor of the American Prospect and the author of Monopolized: Life in the Age of Corporate Power. As always, welcome back to the show.
What's up, John? How you doing?
I'm okay. I'm cautiously optimistic, recovering a little bit in anticipation of the fights to come. And we've got a good hour for people. We're gonna be talking a little bit about some sort of things that have just been brewing for the last few weeks, including the Senate trial of Donald Trump. We have some updates on the pandemic, some pretty dark ones, some horrific ones, but also perhaps a little bit of progress, some more Biden executive orders. This first few days have been pretty eventful in that area. But in like the latter half of the show, we're gonna have a big conversation about tax policy. I know, sexy as always, but there were some pretty big claims made during the election by Biden about what he's gonna do in regard to the Trump tax cuts. And I don't know exactly what I expect. So I'm excited to talk to both of you about that and get a feel for what you think in that area. So big first hour, but you're also gonna wanna stick around for the second hour because Anna will of course be here. She's got Ramesh and Adrian, and they're gonna have an awesome hour of news as well. And with that, why don't we launch into this thing? We didn't know exactly when the Senate trial of Donald Trump would begin, but apparently it's coming soon, according to Chuck Schumer.
Make no mistake, there will be a trial, and when that trial ends, senators will have to decide if they believe Donald John Trump incited the insurrection against the United States.
This is a serious matter, buddy. What are you doing over there? Chuck Schumer, jokester. But anyway, erection or not, Donald Trump is potentially gonna have to answer for what he did. That transmission that he referred to there of the documents from the House to the Senate will trigger preparations for a trial that could start as early as next week. But Senate leaders indicated that they may delay it, potentially for a few weeks so that Trump can organize his defense, which in the end I'm sure is going to be amazing. Remember, as we talk about this, that a conviction requires a 2/3 majority, which means at least 17 Republicans would have to join all of the Democrats, which would be something, because there were 10 Republicans that joined the Democrats in the House, and that was the most bipartisan effort ever. There were way more Republicans in the House to turn over, and so I don't know about the 17. What do both of you think about this? Both about the schedule, that it is going to be happening relatively soon, and also the prospects that it might actually go somewhere.
One, I don't know if this is just derailing this too much, but it's incredible that we're looking at Pelosi and Schumer again as the leaders of the Democratic Party. It's just amazing. We keep doubling down with this old guard. Look, the Republicans in office are disingenuous and they're opportunists. So they'll do whatever's in their best interest, and that's always been their calculus. And that probably will be a non-event, and a lot of them are hoping to pick up a lot of these Trump supporters along the way. But that's been their calculus for a long time. There's no one so smart, they're a US senator, and so dumb that they don't believe in climate change, or they believe that there's widespread voter fraud. It's not a real thing. And so you can almost insert any topic, any issue, and say they'll do whatever best suits them in that particular environment.
David, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, what's in the best interest of the Republican Party and what's in the best interest of individual Republican senators might be at odds here. Mm-hmm. So it's at the best interest of the party maybe to break free of Donald Trump, who was unable to win the presidency and got progressively less popular as he contested a free and fair election. And so finding those votes and ensuring that he can't run again in 2024 is maybe of interest to the party as a whole, and may even be of interest to individual senators who want to run in 2024. Why wouldn't a Tom Cotton or a Ted Cruz vote to convict and knock out their leading challenger for their Republican nomination? However, if they do want to pick up what is still a very large, overwhelming majority of Republicans who support Donald Trump, then it's not in their interest, as Cruz made very clear and Josh Hawley made very clear when they went ahead with objecting to the Electoral College count. So that's the thing that has to be managed here. And everyone's looking at Mitch McConnell. I mean, McConnell has sort of floated out this idea that he may vote to convict. And if he does, he might be able to bring enough with him to actually make it happen. I'm a little skeptical, but I think McConnell is the key here. As far as what this means, this whole trial, it means that you're not going to really get a whole lot done in the U.S. Senate. Now, there already is this question of when there will be an agreement on the sharing of power in a 50-50 Senate. McConnell and Schumer are discussing this. McConnell wants a guarantee that the Democrats will never abolish the filibuster, and Schumer has said, "Go pound sand. We're not doing that." But this only increases the delay. And right now, the committees are set up under the old system, so nobody new has been added to a committee, which means Republicans are in charge of all the committees in the Senate right now. So it's in McConnell's favor to delay on this and to just elongate the timeline. Biden needs to get his nominees through. We have legislation on the table, a $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill that is harder to get through when the Senate is not organized. And you have this impeachment trial. So if McConnell's idea is to just gum up the works and delay, then he's all for having an impeachment trial right now, just as long as it can possibly go, and elongate out this power sharing agreement as much as he can possibly do.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, obviously, the question of what is going to end up happening, if anything, with the filibuster is one of the most important questions for the next, for the rest of American history. But for the next 2 years, especially if the Democrats want to actually accomplish anything. Look, personally, as someone who thinks that it needs to be abolished for the Democrats to accomplish anything, or for the federal government to actually function, I want Mitch McConnell to be as much of a D as he can, and really cause a lot of problems and put a lot of pressure on Schumer to move on this immediately, to not wait 6 months of reaching out your hand, wasted time. I hope that might happen. Now,
the pressure doesn't need to only be on Schumer, right? The pressure needs to be on Joe Manchin, on Kyrsten Sinema, on John Tester, on these members of the Democratic caucus who have expressed opposition to abolishing the filibuster. I mean, there is a sense, it's amazing that you still have to do this, but there is a sense that Schumer needs McConnell to obstruct so he can go back to those people and say, see, if you want to get anything done in the next 2 years, if you want to keep the gavels that you have, we have to do this because McConnell is showing his hand. It's incredible that you even have to do that at this point, though.
Yeah, that is definitely true. The question will be for some of them, how much, like, does Manchin really feel a fire to make sure that a lot is done? Maybe, we'll see, maybe not. In terms of the actual, like, whether convicting Trump and barring him from running, I think that your read is right. Like, theoretically, for some of the most ambitious Republican senators, it's in their interest the most to block him, except that they don't want to be the ones to do it because then he might turn his cannons on them in a year and a half. All of them are interested in it happening. None of them want to be in the 17 that make it happen. But one extra wrinkle that I would throw out is I think that you're right that from Mitch McConnell's point of view, the Republicans who are a little bit maybe more interested in the future of the Republican Party than in their own political aspirations, they might want to block him out because they don't want him running again. And I get that. But there's also this, sort of very early talk about him forming a third party. I would imagine that might even be more horrifying from the Republican point of view. If he were to, pull a sort of faux populist Ross Perot sort of situation in a few years, that could make it incredibly difficult for, Josh Hawley to win as the Republican nominee. So I wonder if that might be a consideration that they'll be thinking about.
Xander, did you want to take that or?
No, I think your calculus is correct in that there's folks who could really benefit from Trump not being a force in the Republican Party anymore, but the blowback is just probably too much for a lot of those people, and so I think you're dead on there. And I don't think maybe in the Republican Party of old, right, the John McCain, Mitt Romney Republican Party, there was enough there in terms of allegiance to the party. But I just think a lot of those folks have been washed out, and it really is just opportunists who have, rode this wave to get in. I don't see a lot of those folks really actually caring that much about, the collective.
Yeah. Well, we also know that Donald Trump in this interim period is assembling his defense team. Technically, he's been playing golf every day, but someone is assembling his defense team. No, really, he has actually been golfing. I would too, honestly. I don't even golf. I would golf right now. Those last 4 years have got to have been stressful for him. But anyway, he's hiring South Carolina-based lawyer Butch Bowers, who I think is the alter ego of someone in the MCU. But anyway, Bowers was counseled to Governor Mark Sanford when he faced impeachment in the South Carolina House in 2009. He also served in the Justice Department in President George W. Bush's administration. So like with virtually every lawyer in the country, I'm not familiar with this person. But the question I have for you is, does Trump's defense in this matter? Or is it just each individual senator is going to make a calculation based on what effect having voting for him to be convicted or not? Like, do we think that there is some narrative that they could push in this defense, some big thing to draw attention? Like, does it actually matter what they do, or is that sort of a sideshow to, do I want to convict the guy who might wreck my career?
I think it's a sideshow. This played out on television. It was one of the most watched events of the last several years. Right. Everybody knows what happened. The president spoke, and not just what he did on that day, on January 6th, but what he did for the preceding 2 months. That was a very public process of contesting the results, inciting the flames of and the passions of his supporters. Culminating in January 6th. So if you don't have an opinion on this by now, I don't know what's wrong with you. So this is, and ultimately impeachment is a political matter. I mean, and we saw that in the House vote. It was a political matter, and most House Republicans decided to stick with the president, and the ones that didn't, I mean, Liz Cheney is being kind of sent a message right now that her leadership is not wanted in the Republican Party because she voted against Donald Trump. And that must be weighing on senators right now who are ambitious, as you said, and maybe see themselves rising through the ranks of the Republican Party. They have to contend with the fact that the one person that was in a leadership position that went against Trump is now seeing the potential for her leadership powers to be stripped.
Yeah, no doubt it's the latter. For all the reasons David stated. Look, his last defense was, what I did was in the best interest of the United States, and therefore it's fine, because me being in a leadership position is in the best interest of the United States. Like the defense was non-existent the last time around, so I don't know why it would play a bigger role this time.
Yeah, that is certainly possible. It is also possible that as one of his defense tactics, he might organize a massive crowd, which would sort of prove the point of the need for it. But anyway, okay, well, with that, we are going to take our first break. When we come back, we're going to jump into the pandemic, how one area of the country is distributing their vaccines and all the problems that's causing, as well as some of the Biden administration's executive orders that bear on the pandemic. We'll have that after this.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of On the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
Welcome back, everyone. You saw there, by the way, a promo for tonight's episode of The Common Room, which you can tune into at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific time at twitch.tv/TYT, where I will be appearing with host Brett Ehrlich, as well as Adriana Vega and Abelina Sabrina of the Republic of Twitch. They will be joining us as well, and it's a great way to close out the week. Have a little bit of fun. We drink a little bit. It should be great. You know what we also have for you? A couple of awesome new designs at Shop TYT. You can see here the chairman of the budget committee design, as well as unamused inauguration Bernie, because we realized that Shop TYT was the only place on the internet that did not have that Bernie. So it's been rectified, but it's awesome. I can't wait to get one. Although I want one in black. We're gonna have to figure that out. But anyway, before we jump back into the news, let's see what's going on with the audience. We have on the member comments, nipple-pierced jank in skinny jeans says, yes, it was dropped. Jack Nicholson nodding from the Departed gif on the power panel intro. Thank you for that. Someone who likes Bernie Sanders says, I know there's a big push to demonize the Cruzes and the Hawleys in the Senate, but I think we need to put the screws more to the supposed moderate GOP senators from purple and blue states, paint them as crazy for siding with crazy, and hopefully with enough pressure, we can get them to break towards cooperating with Dems. Any quick thoughts about that?
I don't know about the second part. I like the first part. I don't know if anyone's going to break to working with Dems, but I like the first part where we shed a light on some of these folks. There's a number of folks like Ron Johnson up in Wisconsin coming up in 2022. I'd love to get out of there. There's amazing organizers and amazing potential Democratic candidates like Mandela Barnes up that way. That would be fantastic to put in the Senate. Awesome. I don't think they're going anywhere though.
We're actually working on that. One of our colleagues is putting together a list of House Republicans who voted to object to the results, and we should have a guideline for folks pretty soon.
If you want to go at them now, if you go to defeattreason.org, we already put up something. We pivoted defeat by tweet to defeat treason, and so anytime what we're calling the seditious six tweet, so that's Cruz, Hawley, you all know the bad actors. We send money to organizers that are working in the districts of all the Republicans who voted to overturn the election. Also, that's an easy plug, I guess, if that's how you're feeling going at these guys. We've got something for you.
I also want to thank our new YouTube members, Casey Grant, Ashton Vogelsberg, the Hindu Jack-O-Lanterns, and Charlie Ball. Thank you for signing on to membership on YouTube, and to new Twitch subs, Shatner Toupee for 2 months, who says, so Trump won't be asking for trial by combat then? It looks like no. I would have loved to have seen Rudy Giuliani defending his honor, wielding a morning star.
That was the most surreal part of a very surreal thing. It was Rudy Giuliani screaming trial by combat.
Yeah, oh man. Okay, we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to the first hour of the Young Turks, here with David and Xander. And we're going to jump into a little bit of information about the pandemic. So let's do that. The initial rollout of the COVID vaccines has not been smooth in a number of different states, sometimes through a complete lack of organization, terrible decisions in terms of the scheduling, and there are other motives that might bear into this. So let's talk about Dallas County. Dallas County Court apparently voted recently to rescind an order that would have prioritized doses of the vaccine for people living in the county's most vulnerable zip codes, but agreed to meet again later this week to design a vaccination plan that will be transparent and accountable. So here's what the original plan was. A divided Dallas County Commissioners Court had voted Tuesday to prioritize vaccines at its Fair Park Distribution Center for individuals in mostly Black and Latino neighborhoods, a reflection of increased vulnerability to the coronavirus in 11 Dallas County zip codes. In Dallas, as in other major Texas cities, distribution sites are more commonly located in white neighborhoods. And early data showed the North Texas County had distributed most of its shots to residents of whiter, wealthier neighborhoods. Now, when they wanted to fix that, Texas health officials pushed back on the proposal, warning that it was not acceptable to the Department of State Health Services. I would love to have heard like extended questioning about that and exactly why a more just, equitable distribution of the vaccines would have been a problem. But in any event, after that pushback, we now have this Dallas court decision. And so I am interested to see in the long run how this is adjudicated, both for Dallas County, but also across the country, where I've read instances of distribution centers being set up in areas that are lower income, but then the actual analysis of the dose distribution found that they were mostly going to people living in a neighboring wealthier county that were crossing over and soaking up those doses. And that, for habitual viewers of the show, is going to be the least surprising thing in the world, that the rich are going to be jumping the lines. But I'm curious for both of your thoughts.
David, do you want to go first?
Sure. A couple things. Number one, I think this is a distribution issue, but it's also a demand issue. So people of color are, and probably rightfully so, more skeptical of large-scale immunization programs because of a very rich history of using communities of color for experimentation, for lack of a better word. And I think that's a history that is only really going to be counteracted with an education campaign. And that has been extremely lacking, especially at the federal level, where there's been no messaging. It's just they've been dumping vaccines on the states and saying, hey, have at it. There's been no real messaging for why this is so important, the steps that were taken to ensure safety and things of that nature. So I think there's a demand issue. It's pretty interesting when you see Bloomberg has these great charts about where the vaccine is being distributed and who's doing a good job and who's not doing such a good job. And the worst states right now for vaccine distribution are California and a bunch of states in the Deep South. And you'd think that they have no connection to one another whatsoever in terms of tax policy, in terms of the type of government and things. But you have California, a state with a heavily diverse population, and you have the Deep South, which has pockets of heavy Black communities. And the states that are actually getting the vaccines out are states like small states like West Virginia and North and South Dakota, which are very homogenous in terms of their race. So I think there are some interesting things to draw from that. But I think early on in the vaccine process, we got very hung up on prioritization and trying to construct the most perfect, equitable kind of way in which to get these shots out. And we forgot about the fact that when you get a shot into somebody's arm, that helps everybody, because it means that less people are using the health system. It means that it's one step closer to herd immunity, and that protects all of us. So we just need to get these things out at some level. We do need to make particular care on populations, particularly around the demand side, to make sure that Black communities, Latino communities actually want to get this virus. But we just need to actually get this thing out, because the faster that we do it and return to normalcy, the better off we'll be from a public health standpoint, from an economic standpoint, from every standpoint.
Really, really interesting insights on the demand side, David. My first thought is, look, inequities have existed in this country long before COVID. I think education, policing, we're all familiar with them. I think we should be grateful for this thing in some ways, because I think what it's revealed is that maybe with the inequities around education or policing, we could write them off as the remnants of a past that was intentionally inequitable, and we were, trying to rebuild them to a more equitable state. And what we've seen is that we'll willingly rebuild inequitable systems like the COVID vaccination in this day and age. Between that and, this resurgence of white supremacy, we're just seeing there's more cultural work to be done there, which I think is important. And I think the other thing that maybe hits home about this is there was a moment there during the beginning stages of the pandemic where we were all vulnerable in a way where we thought, or at least many of us thought, we might be reliant on systems. Many of us who aren't typically reliant on systems thought we may be reliant on systems, whether that's eviction moratoriums or welfare or whatnot. And so because of that shared vulnerability, these inequities seem more intolerable because we can empathize with them. We saw ourselves as someone who would also have to rely on those same systems, which I think at the end of the day, I don't know how long we carry that with us, but I think at the end of the day, it's making us more empathetic and more upset when we see our social systems fail to live up to what I think we'd like them to be.
Yeah. Look, as both of you pointed out, it is complicated. I can't help but think that over the past, month or 2 months or so that since the vaccines have been approved for distribution, or even hypothetically in the months leading up to it, the federal government caring at all to get involved might have helped in some way. But why would they have? That would have been so inconsistent with the overall federal response to the pandemic. And he's out, he's already paid the electoral price for not giving a damn about this, but it's just it's like add that to the pile of things that needlessly caused more loss of life. You never know when new administrations come in and then they say, here's what was left for us. You never know exactly how much of that you can trust, but when they say that there was no vaccine distribution plan, I kind of believe them. I think that there was probably nothing. I think, like their fantasies for tax reform, I think it could have fit on a postcard, probably. And people will die as a result of it, potentially thousands or tens of thousands. I also wanted to just throw out there, there's going to be a lot of these sorts of anniversaries coming, but here's a fun one. It is the 1 year anniversary of Donald Trump telling CNBC, we have it totally under control. It's one person coming in from China. We have it under control. It's going to be just fine. And that is because the first person crossed over into America from China that was infected with COVID, or at least the first person that we knew of at that point, since we weren't testing for it. Fact check shows that was not true. It was not going to be just fine, and
it wasn't just one.
More than 500,000 will die. No, it was.
Look, John. He didn't want to panic people. He didn't want to give people the wrong impression that this might be problematic.
What's so upsetting hearing that is that 10 months later, he got 74 million votes. You know what I'm saying? There is, to a degree, it's acceptable if you're watching Fox News all day and you're being told certain things and you get whipped up, that's fine. But this guy said things that kind of, were contradicted, the next week by himself. It's remembering those type of things, to be honest, that makes me realize what a hole we're in with a certain decent percentage of our base, and how someone who was so wrong still garnered that many votes from folks who followed him. There's just so much work to be done with that base. It's confusing how to cross that bridge with those folks.
Yeah. One thing I'm thinking about is we know that, and we knew this well before the Biden team had to tell us, that there was no distribution plan at the federal level. I mean, they told us very specifically, like, we give the vaccines to the states and they figure it out. Like, we knew that. And that was certainly a problem, especially in the early going, when you were relying on these states that were already dealing with the pandemic and the health consequences of that to actually throw a mass immunization program that's one of the largest logistical processes in American history. On top of that was too much for these states to ask. Yeah. The states are sort of figuring it out, though. So, Biden has this benchmark of 100 million shots in the first 100 days. We are almost at that level right now. And we were since the beginning, like the end of the Trump presidency, we were at about 900,000 a day. You don't have to get that much more to get to 1 million shots a day and be on that level. The problem is that 100 million in 100 days isn't enough. I mean, if we want to actually get to something resembling normalcy by summer, we have to do much better than 100 million in 100 days. And the problem that we're running up against is the problem that the Trump administration had that they don't talk about, which is the problem of production. We don't know if there's going to be enough vaccine to get everybody who wants a shot to have one in a timely fashion. And the fact that we didn't spend every available dollar to pre-position all of these vaccines, to build the factories that we had to build, even if we built factories for vaccines that ended up not being approved by the FDA. So what if you wasted a little bit of money on that? To be able to get all these things through, and then when you did approve one like Pfizer, Moderna, to reconvert all of the other facilities that are working on vaccines and say, nope, we got two, we'll pay you here. We'll just give you, here's the formula, just go make some for us. That is almost a bigger problem right now, because we're rapidly moving from a time when the problem was distribution to now the problem is supply.
David John, not to hold us up too much on this point, but I just wonder, as these things are kind of become more and more apparent, the lack of Trump's willingness to ensure that we can get past this pandemic as quickly as possible. Do you think this will have, and I know this is so hard to predict, but any blowback from his base as like this becomes more apparent that we just didn't have the infrastructure in place to help? Is something as core as like literal health, or is it zero? Is there anything that impacts this?
I mean, he lost the election, right?
Yeah,
and I think without a pandemic, he probably would not have lost the election.
That's right.
That's my counterfactual.
And I don't think it's likely to more now that they can say it's Biden's fault, but it did have some effect, sure.
Yeah. And they lost in Georgia. And the reason I think they lost in Georgia was more economic and the issue of the $2,000 checks. But that also is a reaction to the pandemic as well that caused a blowback. So where Democrats were able to rather skillfully and unexpectedly go with populism in a way that managed to turn out voters. I think, it's a problem that 74 million people voted for Trump, but let's not forget that 81 million people voted for Joe Biden, who's not exactly a stirring political figure, but he was not Trump, and that's what ended up succeeding. So we got to keep focus on that too.
I agree. So let's transition now to what is being done. Biden over the last 24 hours has a new set of executive orders aimed to deal with the pandemic. With the first one being something that a lot of people, both in and outside of government, have been calling for. It would have been a great thing for President Trump to have done like 6 months ago. But President Joe Biden will use the Defense Production Act to boost production of vaccines, testing, and personal equipment to help ensure the US will have enough vaccines, testing, and protective equipment to withstand the coronavirus pandemic. Only took like a year. And so one of Biden's orders would increase the production of a syringe that pharmacists have discovered allows them to extract an extra dose of the vaccine from vials. Another would establish the Pandemic Testing Board. The aim of the new board is to increase COVID testing, not to slow it down, just to be clear. I know a lot of people have been led to believe that slowing down the testing is a good thing during a pandemic. It turns out it's not. So another of executive orders mandates the wearing of masks on intercity buses and trains, as well as in airports and on airplanes. So there's a lot there. The Defense Production Act, increased testing, and to the limited extent that the president can unilaterally mandate mask wearing, mandating it in those areas. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's all good stuff. The syringe thing is a way to increase capacity without having to build factories or reconfigure factories to make these very complex vaccines. The issue is that when you get a shot, there's always some wasted amount of medication. And there's a difference in a syringe between what they call low dead space and high dead space. And the difference there is one dose. So you're instantly, if you have a dose, you have a vial that has 5 doses in it, and you can get 6 out of it if you use this particular type of syringe, you're increasing the production, the supply of vaccine by 20% just by doing that. So it's unclear exactly how much wasted vaccine we ended up with because we gave syringes that weren't specified in this manner. But that's like a cheat. That's like an easy way to get a lot more vaccines out into the population. So it's great that they're thinking at that granular level about how to get this done. So plan beats no plan. So I think it will be better than the Trump version of this. The question is, are we too far into this now that being able to reconfigure factories or add capacity is just going to take months that we don't really have?
It might. By the way, a little bit of breaking news or news from 30 minutes ago that bears exactly on what we were talking about. So we have the current rollout of the vaccine, the amount that we've distributed, all of that. Obviously, it has not been good enough. So then we find out, hey, specialty syringes, we can extract an extra dose. That puts us a little bit ahead. Well, not so fast, because New York Times is now reporting that Pfizer has lobbied for the US government to count those extra doses against the amount that they have pledged, 200 million doses by the end of July. So no, we're not ahead, because now they're going to ship less vials of the vaccine to us. Yeah. So I'm starting to think that this lobbying isn't good for the American people. That's
an under the radar problem, that Pfizer and Moderna made very big promises about how much vaccine they were going to get to the American people in these orders. And it doesn't look like they're going to meet that production level. And so for Pfizer, this is an easy way for them to say, oh, that counts. And so now we hit our goal, when they were never going to hit their goal. And it's the same thing with Moderna. So there's a problem on the production side of this that needs to be figured out. Now, one of the things Biden did in the Defense Production Act was increase some of the ingredients, mandate production of some of the ingredients that go into a vaccine, because there were supply chain problems. They couldn't get enough of a particular enzyme or a particular ingredient that is needed in production. But that doesn't happen by snapping your fingers. This is stuff that should have been figured out 6 months ago, 9 months ago. I mean, it should have been figured out as soon as someone went into a stage 3 trial. the production process should have started at a much higher level than it did. I mean, we did have some pre-produced vaccine that rolled out immediately after it got FDA approval, but it's not nearly enough.
Yep, 100%. Let me give you a little bit more of the developments. Dr. Anthony Fauci, Biden's current chief medical advisor, told the executive board of the World Health Organization Thursday that the US is going to join the COVID-19 Vaccines Global Access Facility, an international alliance led by WHO that seeks to provide COVID vaccines to the world's poorest countries. And we talked about this last week on the damage report, but the reason that there needs to be this international push to provide access to the vaccines in some of these poor countries is because in the vast majority of them, there has been none. I don't mean like a little bit, I mean literally no doses across dozens of countries. And you can see here a little infographic put together by the BBC, huge regions of the world.
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your activity more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today.
Currently have none or effectively none. I think Guinea got 25 doses, I think it was, for members of their government. And many countries would have considered themselves lucky to get those 25. So a little bit of US involvement, perhaps leadership in making sure that it's distributed equitably around the globe would be a great thing, especially considering that we don't live in a walled off or bubbled off country. If you want, like even if you're setting aside the massive human toll of allowing the deaths to continue to spiral out of control in so many parts of the world, if you want our economy to recover, if you're that sort of person, that's the only thing you care about, that sort of relies on the world actually being able to travel and trade and all of that. And so I understand for a lot of people, this isn't going to be one of the first priorities, but it certainly needs to be up there.
Most definitely. Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head. We're living in a connected world. Isolationist policies or, only me policies just don't work anymore. They just don't. Mm-hmm. And maybe in the near future, we need things like the UN to have some more teeth and WHO to have some more teeth. And maybe while we have some competent leadership, we can institutionalize that in some ways, because obviously there's just going to be more and more things that come up that require global coordination. On top of the refugee crisis and the climate crisis that are currently spiraling around the world.
Well, the international issue is huge, and it's entirely a consequence of the way that we handle medical development and drug development in the world. We grant these patents to companies like Pfizer and companies like Moderna for exclusivity for a period of time. In this case, Moderna got all of their research and development money from the United States. Pfizer was in, they had a partnership with a German firm called BioNTech, which got all of its money from Germany. So these are publicly developed drugs, but we still gave a patent to these companies to exclusively provide the drug, and these countries abroad could make generic versions of it. I mean, a stunning amount of generic manufacturing is done in India, for example. They could definitely do it if they were able to be to grant the technology and the formula to these pharmaceutical facilities, but they have a patent, and it hasn't been done. And usually the U.S. is a great supporter of its pharmaceutical industry in maintaining those and denying generic production for the developing world. There's a huge issue in the HIV situation in terms of drugs for HIV in the developing world, where the US threatened sanctions on India and other countries who were producing generic versions of HIV drugs. So this is a larger question. The way that this vaccine was developed with public money and public support should be the way we develop these things going forward. It should be a different model for how we produce prescription drugs in the world. And this is the test case for why we got something like this out in such a short period of time. And so hopefully we learn from this rather than falling back on the old habits of the patent monopoly system.
Right. Just another data point that healthcare and capitalism don't play well together more often than not.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not going to put a bunch of money on us learning the lesson, though, that you were talking about. But it's an opportunity. Look, there's a number of other executive orders that Biden has released having to do with federal worker protections, minimum wage, things like that. These are all important, but unfortunately, we are running very low on time. So we're going to go to our second break. When we come back, much more to talk about. Welcome back, everyone. Let's see what's going on with the audience in the member comments. Let's see. We have Vegas Wolf who says, we have the unamused Bernie shirts and the Dragon Squad items. Could we get an unamused Bernie dragon? We could. I don't know that the meme's gonna last long enough necessarily. It is possible. Let's see. Gabby says, I feel like this syringe plan is about equivalent with my plan for when I run out of toothpaste, but somehow stretch out the empty tube for another 9 days. It is something like that, actually.
John, do you have any idea physically like what they're talking about? Like,
yeah. So basically,
what actually is the issue?
So the idea is that they say that there's a certain number of doses inside of a vial of the vaccine, but in theory, you can actually pull out a little bit more with certain syringes. That's the idea.
Because they have better suction power, because they go at a different angle. Do you know, like, what about
I don't remember. I did know at one point. I don't know actually, but supposedly it does happen that you can get 1 or 2 extra doses out of them, something like that. Well, because the idea is that they have to err on the side of putting more into the vial rather than less, because the natural variation from one vial to another, they can't have less than the listed number. And that's sort of how it works out. Although unfortunately you also can't combine different vials. Apparently that doesn't work. It wouldn't be safe.
Oh, interesting.
Now, Dr. Zippy McScoot sent us a super chat that says, in the 1980s as a kid, we were vaccinated by the millions in school gyms. Why is it so difficult now? Well, I think there you had established protocols, established production, those sorts of things. I think that in theory, we will get to that at some point. There's just been, it's relatively new. They're trying out different things in different areas, and not nearly enough work was done by the federal government to expedite the process. That's what it seems like anyway. Okay, over at Twitch, Depressed Progressive gave us 10,000 bits. Depressed Progressive, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Makes me less depressed of a progressive, so thank you for that. Over on Twitch, Elise, who made the new Sprocket and Hilo emotes. Well, thank you for that. I was delighted when I saw my dog's face on Twitch, and seeing Sprocket always makes me happy. Gifted 10 subs as well. At least thank you so much for that. Shoegaze Dragon Georgie gifted 5 subs. EK Greens gifted 5. Thank you to both of you. Egypt subscribed for the 7th month with Prime and says 7 months with Prime, taking money from Bezos and giving it to TYT. Could anything be better? Well, thank you for that. Big Bull Dragon subscribed for 5 months and said this anniversary is all Obi Mom's fault. Thank you. And Obi Mom, if you end up seeing this, our thoughts are going out to you. Hope that you're doing better. Chump Suey subscribed for the 4th month. Thank you for that. And let's see, maybe one more comment, a member comment from Hillbilly Farmer, who says, of course there was no plan. He touted his replacement for Obamacare for 4 years, lies and corruption, and 400,000 and counting American lives lost. Yeah, we never did get those taxes or that healthcare plan. Maybe in 2 weeks or so. I don't know if he's not busy with the impeachment trial. Anyway, we got a little bit more news for you, so stick around on the other side of this. Welcome back, everyone, to what remains of the first hour of the TYT Power Panel here with Xander and David. And we got one more story at the very least that we're gonna get to. And then in not much longer, Anna Kasparian is gonna be here with Ramesh and Adrian. So that's gonna be fun as well. You're not gonna wanna miss that. But before that, let's talk taxes. We know that Joe Biden has some big priorities and big promises that he has to deliver on. And one of them has to do with the big Trump tax cut, effectively the piece of legislation that was passed over the last 4 years. Now, President Biden said during a presidential debate back in September that he was going to eliminate the Trump tax cuts. Yet he and his aides are committing to only a partial rollback of the law with their focus on provisions that help corporations and the very rich. It's a position that Mr. Biden held throughout the campaign and that he clarified in the September debate by promising to only partly repeal a corporate tax cut. He said, I'm going to get rid of the bulk of Trump's $2 trillion tax cut. And a lot of you may not like that, but I'm going to close loopholes like capital gains and stepped up basis. To give you a little bit of facts about what was changed in 2017, that law cut taxes for individuals and lowered the corporate tax rate to 21% from 35%, an amazing percentage drop there. He said he would raise income taxes to pre-Trump levels, that's Biden. Only at the top bracket, an increase to 39.6% from 37%. He called for raising the corporate tax rate to 28% from 21%, notably shorter than the 35% that preceded it, which that was the most obvious prediction ever at the time, that if it was ever raised, it ain't getting back up to what it was beforehand. So there's a lot here. He's made some big claims about the bulk of the tax cuts being repealed. But then when you look at the actual details, it really does cut down to a smaller and smaller portion of the overall tax cuts. I'm curious for both of you, though, what do you think in the end is going to make it through not only Biden's proposal, but actually being passed by Congress?
I'm not sure anything's going to make it through. I mean, that goes back to our filibuster question. If it's a question of relying on Republicans to reverse a tax cut, ain't going to happen. So maybe in a budget reconciliation, which is a special process through the budget where you can do a 50 vote environment, maybe you get something through. 28% is where Obama, frankly, wanted to take corporate taxes. So no surprise that that's where Biden wants to go. He said throughout the campaign that he didn't want to raise taxes on anyone making less than $400,000 a year. But the other side of that is that we have such an unequal society that you can actually raise quite a bit of money on people only making over $400,000 a year. And the ways that he talks about this, by the estate tax or what's called on the right the death tax, the inheritance tax. If you do changes to the corporate tax cut and also the thing around S corps, which are these pass-through corporations that individuals set up for themselves to give themselves a lower tax rate. So if you put those three things together and then you also do what he talked about, I know the most boring thing in the world is step up in basis, but let me explain just real quick. So like when Sheldon Adelson died just a few weeks ago, every investment that he had, even if he bought it at 2 and it was now at 400, as he gives it to his heirs, it now is like it's at 400, as if they bought it at 400. In other words, all of the capital gains that he never realized in life get wiped out, get completely vanished as he passes that on to its heirs. It's a huge amount of money that is saved that way. It's a way that the rich give money to their descendants without, while avoiding tons of taxation. So you put that all together, and you are talking about trillions of dollars that you would raise. So while it's maybe not to the level that everybody might want, it is a lot of money, and it probably will be paired with a very large infrastructure program, because that's what Biden said is what he wants to do in the fall. He wants to pair taxes with infrastructure.
It just, there's no real argument anymore for not having very high corporate taxes, right? I think there was a thesis maybe when Ford was employing 2 million people that if you let them keep more money, they'll hire more people. The big winners in our economy hardly employ anyone anymore. And so while yes, it's nice to get, that 7% increase, I think like we definitely shouldn't be celebrating. We should look at even the logic of letting wealthy people or corporations hold on to, even a significant share of their profits or tax or having low taxes at all. Like, what is the core value in the 21st century of these people having more resources at this point? I think there was an argument at one point that sure, they could provide more jobs if they were able to, hold on to more of the capital. Now it's all stock buybacks, and Instagram, when it was bought for $1 billion, had 20 people working at it. These companies don't employ people.
Right. I mean, let me agree with Xander that there's no real argument that we shouldn't go back to the state of being in 2016. It's not like that was a hellscape for corporations. They weren't able to make any money or anything like that. So I completely agree with that. And progressives should push as much as they possibly can to maximize the amount of money that you can gain from that, because obviously it can be put to good use. All I'm saying is that because we have such an unequal society, that even a cutoff as high as $400,000 a year still yields a ton of money.
Although, at least based on the estimates that I've seen, not enough necessarily to account for the programs that Biden has said those repeals will pay for.
Which we don't have to pay for, by the way. I mean, right? There's no need that we actually have to, do the green eye shade and line up every dollar that's coming in on taxes with every dollar going out. We've seen in the pandemic that we've put $3 trillion out there without having to pay for it, and this is a salutary thing that Democrats have stopped with their love of budget hawkery. That they're no longer saying that everything has to be paid for. So that's a good thing, I would say.
That is a good thing. And then let's also. Sorry, Zainer.
No, this is just the downside of being stuck with someone like Biden. This is it. This is what you fight for. That's what your North Star looks like, is 28%. I think you're right. It was Obama's number. It's probably his North Star as well. Meantime, every retail business in the United States learned how to utilize automation and won't be bringing back the same amount of people. There are going to be less and less, not only winners, obviously, because the corporations are getting bigger, but there's going to be less and less people even working for those winners. And so we kind of have these dual freight trains of climate change, but also automation bearing down upon us that requires us to build safety nets where people can live dignified lives, even when they're not employed. And it just feels like, we're playing by the old rules here. And that's why I worry most about kind of, I talked about Pelosi and Schumer at the top of the hour and Biden too, is that they're just not responding to those threats in the way that is becoming increasingly obvious that we need to respond to them.
Well, yeah, I mean, if the leadership across, three areas is going to be Biden and Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, the fact that you're playing by the old rules seems like a literal trubut you're going to be doing that. And let's bear in mind, by the way, in terms of that, let's that 28%, but pre-cut the overall percentage of the nation's tax burden that was taken up by corporate taxes had already been falling as a share for literally decades, and then they decided, let's cut it in half, basically.
Right.
No
so
corporation,
now we're not even getting.
No corporation pays 28%. No corporation paid 35%. That is a nominal rate. That is not the effective tax rate. And so there's an argument to be made that the rate, the nominal rate, is important, but almost or just as important, if not more so, is getting rid of all the loopholes that allow corporations to dramatically lower themselves well beyond that 28% rate. Because as we know, scores of corporations paid zero in taxes throughout the last several years because of all the loopholes they were able to enjoy.
Well, that's true, David, but that only includes some of the wealthiest companies in the history of our planet. So should we really be so worried about it? Yeah, but let's also, if we're, and this will probably be what we close out the hour on, if we're talking about the unfortunate things with having Biden as president, like sure, he might take back some of those Trump era tax cuts, but some of the conversations we were starting to have during the primary about the possibility of a wealth tax. I mean, we're miles away from something like that at this point, and it's unlikely that any amount of pressure is going to get Biden, in line with that. It's possible that with a strong progressive president putting sort of persistent pressure on the Senate, it would still be it would be a huge battle and maybe impossible, but at least it would have been a possibility. And that's one of the many things that we have unfortunately lost out on.
100%.
Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have, but I want to thank you, both of you, for joining me, David and Xander. As we close out, starting with David, where can people see more of your work?
Yeah, prospect.org. And on the Twitters at DDayen, DDAYEN. And I'm doing a new newsletter that is a chronicle of the first 100 days of the Biden presidency. It's called First 100. And you can get that in your email inbox. And you can also sign up and get everything about it at prospect.org/first100.
Awesome. And Xander?
Right on. Yeah, I have a podcast called What We Don't Know, where I talk to leading activists and change makers. You can catch me there. If you feel like defeating these Republicans, like I said, go to defeattreason.org. We're going after everyone who voted to overturn the election. If you happen to be wealthy, we have something called One for Democracy, where you donate 1% of your net worth to democratic infrastructure, importantly, Black and brown led community organizers that are doing the hard work of protecting our democracy. So that's at onefordemocracy.org. John, thank you so much.
Thank you. Glad to have both of you on. And for me, you can see me every day on the Damage Report. But thank you to everybody for watching this first hour. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, Anna Kasparian is going to be here. Ramesh and Adrian are going to join us and join her. And so you're definitely not going to want to miss that. I'll see you in a few.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.